When I was a kid, there was nothing more fun than hanging out with friends. Yes, outside, away from home, not sitting at a computer on comms or Discord. Exploring the neighborhood, riding bikes, going to parks. But there was one thing you saved your allowance for, especially boys, and that was going to the arcade. There was something about walking into an arcade, hearing the sounds of all the different games being played, the chatter of excited kids and their friends. It was magical and so much fun. Playing games in that environment on those old machines was an experience that can't be duplicated or matched by sitting home playing modern consoles or computers and talking to friends through a headset. Now everyone knows about the famous arcade games: Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Super Mario, Missile Command, Space Invaders, Asteroids, Dragon's Lair. But besides those legendary games that were always in every arcade all the time, there were other games that cycled in and out. These lesser known and played titles were some of my favorite ones to engage with. So here are a few lesser known arcade games that I loved to play as a kid. Now I've started off with one that is semi-well known. Gorf was a 1981 game where you play as a space cadet, cycling through 5 different stages to increase your rank from Space Cadet to Space Avenger. The 5 stages consisted of Astro Battles, a Space Invaders clone, Laser Attack, Galaxians, Galaxians clone, Space Warp, and the Flagship. Each time you defeat all 5 scenarios, you rank up another level, and the cycle repeats with harder difficulty. What I also loved was the synthesized speech from the game, which at the time was still somewhat of a novelty. I loved playing Gorf, and while it's hardly an unknown game, it is still a lesser known game than, say, Pac-Man or Donkey Kong. Developed in 1982 and based on the fairy tale Jack and the Beanstalk, Jack the Giant Killer is a simple platformer with 4 stages where you control Jack navigating his way up the beanstalk, then stealing 4 different things from the sleeping giant's lair: a musical harp, a golden goose, a bag of coins, and finally the princess. After obtaining the items, the giant will chase after you while throwing things down as you descend the beanstalk back to your home. This game turned out to be quite the commercial failure, and didn't stick around for very long, but I distinctly remember playing it and enjoying it, despite its simplicity and crude gameplay even for 1982. The game disappeared rather quickly from the arcade, so I only played it a few times, but it was enough for me to still remember it to this day. Also released in 1982 was Bagman, where you play as an escaped convict of sorts, looting mine shafts for their bags of money and placing them in a minecart, the object simply being to collect them all each stage. There is a timer element to it where you continually lose points, and if it reaches 0 then you die. Depositing the bags of money into the cart refills some of those points and keeps it going. There are also a few guards that will chase and kill you if they catch you. You can stun them by dropping money bags on them, or using a pickaxe, which each stage has randomly placed. Some shafts also have moving carts, which will also do you in if they hit you. However, you can either avoid them completely by grabbing the ceiling beams above you, or you can drop down into them and ride them to the next screen. There are a few voice lines uttered by the game's protagonist, but the dialogue is in French. For example, when the bagman drops a bag of money into the cart, he utters "à moi," or "all mine." I used to love playing this game when it came out, though it did disappear relatively quickly from my arcade.
Ay, ay, ay.
Even though it's 2026 and they're still making James Bond movies, the cultural impact of the character is not nearly what it was when I was a kid. James Bond was cool, debonair, and lethal, with all kinds of cool gadgets at his disposal, including his Aston Martin car. Spy Hunter, a vertical scroller which came out in 1983, was a game where you played as a spy driving the fictitious G6155 Interceptor car, an obvious reference to James Bond and his Aston Martin. It's equipped with machine guns in the front so you can shoot at enemy cars, all while a version of the Peter Gunn theme plays in the background. You also have a few power-up style novelties for dealing with enemies chasing you, which include a smoke screen and an oil slick, and also surface-to-air missiles for dealing with enemy helicopters dropping bombs. There are also bulletproof cars that need to be forced off the side of the road. There's also stages that include you driving a hydroplane instead of the Interceptor car. The arcade cabinet used a 2-position gearshift lever, and a steering yoke with 5 buttons, and a dashboard with status lights, making it unique looking and feeling for the time. I vividly remember playing this game as a kid and I loved it, though again it didn't stick around in my arcade very long. Though it did survive a bit longer than Bagman or Jack the Giant Killer. Now, while most kids grew up playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out on the Nintendo, a lot of them didn't know it started as an arcade cabinet game in 1984. Produced by Nintendo, you play as an unnamed green boxer, with the torso section being grid-like so you could see your opponent's actions through your character model. Obviously, in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, they rectify this by putting Little Mac below the opponent. The opponent lineup consists of Glass Joe, Piston Hurricane, Bald Bull, Kid Quick, Pizza Pasta, and finally the champion Mr. Sandman. Each opponent has their own signature fighting style and weaknesses to exploit. Once you defeat Sandman, your model turns gold, as you are now the reigning champion, and you repeat fighting the same opponents, just at harder difficulty. The arcade cabinet used 2 screens, which was unusual for the time, the top screen being used for statistics and the bottom for gameplay. It had a joystick and 3 buttons, 2 for left and right punches, and 1 large button for uppercuts. The game also featured voice lines, which were also not terribly common in games at the time. I played this game a lot, and having experienced it in the arcade in all its glory, I was always underwhelmed when playing the Nintendo version, always wishing I could be playing the arcade version instead. This game stuck around the longest of any on the list, but still disappeared while mainstays like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong stayed around virtually forever.